focusing on the historical changes in water resources and how Egypt has been dealing with the events brought from the water sources. Before we begin, let me give you a brief overview of our agenda for today. We will start with a lecture session from our resource person, followed by a Q&A session, and we encourage you all to ask as many questions as you like. Then we will have a reflective remarks from Mr. Deepak Givali, sir, and we will finally wrap up the session with some closing remarks by Dr. Nagminder Dahal, sir. Before we start, I want to remind everyone of the rules of engagement for this webinar. We encourage open and respectful communication. Please keep your microphones muted and use the chat functions to ask questions or share your comments. If you have any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat and we will do our best to assist you. Also, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and by joining this webinar, you consent to be recorded. Now, with further ado, I would like to begin request our speaker, Honorable Dr. Bsam sir, to honor us with his lecture session. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Bsam, and thank you very much for the people of Nepal. How interesting is this? I've been giving lectures for the last 40 years, but this is my first time to have two nations of history and two nations of civilization which influenced the world without any exaggeration, the Nepal civilization and the Egyptian civilization. So this is quite interesting and quite exciting for the Egyptians when they heard here, as Anjali here, I would like to thank for all the efforts she's done in the last few days and weeks to manage this lecture to come out to the light. Once again, my name is Bsam, as Anjali introduced me. I'm your brother from Egypt. I'm from Alexandria. I live now in Cairo, so I'm talking to you now from Cairo, from a district called Heliopolis. Now, the sources of water in Egypt for the coming few minutes is going to be quite interesting for many people who are interested in waters. But before we talk about the River Nile, let me tell you, Anjali was introducing me in the, one of the things that I do is that I sometimes lecture about the start of hieroglyphs, the start of the writings, the commencing of the writing system of the world, actually. Started on the banks of the river, and before it started in the Egyptian peninsula of Sinai as an alphabet. The interesting thing is the first letter in the name Nepal, which is letter N, in hieroglyphs is the waves of the water. Now, how interesting is this? So when you want to write in hieroglyphs letter N, you write it in the form of a zigzag coming out and down line, and it is the waves of the water. Of course, at that time, the ancient Egyptians will be talking mainly about the waves of the water of the River Nile, even though they had great deal of commerce happening on the Red Sea, as we excavated in Egypt many harbors, ancient Egyptian harbors. One of them was excavated in 2013 on the Red Sea, and it was studied by the world to become the most ancient, used, still happening as a monument, as an antiquity harbor in the world. That is around 119 kilometers away from a very famous city in Egypt called the city of Suez. The River Nile is a child river, as we know the River Nile now, going through over 10 countries in Africa, and considered to be the longest, and for some studies, the second longest river in the world, with sweet water happening in the beautiful Africa all the way until the delta in Egypt. And in the delta in Egypt, the two main, if you like, sources of canals coming out, diverge from the main course of the River Nile and pouring into the Mediterranean. And that will be the end of the kind of course, if you like, of the river, or the journey of the water, which started in the heart of Africa and ended on the northern coast of Egypt. The River Nile was formed in different phases. It was not all formed at once geologically. There was not one event, geological event, that actually expanded and cut earth, and then the water went through. No, it actually took time until it will appear the way how you see it today. On the banks of the River Nile, which was the main source for the ancient Egyptians, the communities started to live, to build houses, to learn about fishing, to learn about how the usage of the water for irrigation. But before that, the people were in the mountains or in the oases or in the desert, and they were depending upon wells and about rain. So now, before the River Nile, the sources of the ancient Egyptians, before they were introduced to the daily life on the River Nile banks, they depended basically on the rain. And we all know that Egypt, all the way until almost 3,000, 4,000, and some historians would tell you that the last rainy era was 9,500 years. So Egypt was a very rainy country before desertification. Here is the expression, desertification, desert gaining on green, desertification, began thousands of years ago, which led today to us having around 93% desert of the Egyptian nation, and the rest is green. And there is a great deal of efforts made by the Egyptians in the last, I would say, at least 40 years to green the desert and to green yellow golden sands and change it into the green for plantation, for societies, and of course using a great deal of canals derived from the River Nile. Egyptians, as in ancient times and in modern times, were very clever and still very clever in using the water and in digging canals. And the proof for that is, for example, the Canal of Peace. Canal of Peace took place as a project in the days of our late President Anwar el-Sadat. I trust many of you know him. And of course, he is considered to be also one of our history heroes. And the decision was, we want to get the water of the River Nile into Sinai. Now, the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula is almost 61,000 square kilometers. So to green a big land like this in Egypt would need a great deal of water. Now, it rained in Sinai, and in places in Sinai like Catherine and Moses Mountain Place, you can easily see snow. Yes, believe it or not, you can see snow in Egypt. We are amazed. So you can see snow in a place called Catherine, where there is a very famous monastery, the monastery of Catherine in Sinai. There is Horeb Mountain, the close named, so-called named Moses Mountain, and so on. And in December and January, you will easily see the whole of Catherine covered in snow, just like any place else near, for example, Europe or the States or places in Asia or elsewhere in the world. So the Egyptians dug a huge canal, which, believe it or not, would go under the Suez Canal. You can believe that. From the main course of the River Nile and the Delta, they would dig the water and the water will run. And in order for the water to go from the place of the River Nile, going through the desert, and then Sinai, the Egyptian Sinai, well, here is the Suez Canal. So water should go under the Suez Canal and pour into Sinai. And they did. So a canal over a canal. So the Suez Canal, the famous Suez Canal that links the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, and then the Canal of Peace, which goes under it, pouring irrigation water and usage for your daily life, usage water into the Sinai Peninsula. So that was pretty amazing. And we were all very proud of this canal in Egypt, because also it started a great deal of new societies in Sinai, something that we are encouraging since the 1970s, actually. The River Nile, back again to ancient Egypt, the River Nile was considered the pure water of life. And the ancient Egyptians thought and believed that there is a river Nile in heavens. So there will be a river Nile that they see and they deal with and they drink from and they clean from and they irrigate from and they feed and drink all their animals and pet animals as farmers and peasant farmers, and they will fish in it. They will get beautiful Nile perch. Nile perch is a famous fish on the river Nile, and it is famous for its white meat, delicious white meat. And Nile perch can go to huge sizes. It can grow into huge sizes. And now it's in the Nasser Lake, for example, the artificial lake, which was formed due to the high dam. And I'll go back to the Nasser Nubian Sea, as we call it, or the Nasser Lake, or the Nubian Sea, because it is one of the greatest artificial lakes in the world. It goes over 500 kilometers long from the high dam in Aswan in the south of beautiful Egypt and Nubia. Nubia is Egypt at that time and now, and goes all the way to extended into Sudan itself. So it crosses the borders into Sudan. How big is this? It's huge. And will be a beautiful, amazing number of Nile perch as fish. So it's good for the people to feed on the Nile perch, as it happened in ancient Egypt, to the point that the ancient Egyptians drew, when you go to the tombs and you go to the temples in ancient Egypt and you visit them today, you will see the most exquisite, detailed aquarium, if you like, ancient Egyptian aquarium, everywhere you go. It's in many tombs. And there will be, in one scene, there will be at least from 7 to 10 different types of Nile River fish. And the River Nile yellow snake, there will be the turtle, the River Nile turtle, there will be the Nile perch, there will be other, there will be the elephant snout fish, famous for its snout as the elephant trunk. So they call it the elephant snout fish, with the catfish. The catfish was very famous in ancient Egypt to the point that one of our first kings who ruled unified Egypt in the first dynasty or first dynasty, the first royal family, his name was Narmer, called Narmer today in English, but originally in hieroglyphics Narmer. Narmer, part of his name, part of the name of the king of Egypt, 3,200 years before Christ, believe it or not, was the catfish. So this is how important the River Nile, how influential the River Nile, to the point that later, when the Persians, the Persian kingdom in Asia, was introduced to the Egyptians, they loved the water of the River Nile, to the point that they used to send knights, soldiers from Persia, believe it or not, to Egypt to bring water from the River Nile and back to Persia, to put those pots with the River Nile water with the treasures in the tombs of the kings. And they believed that the water of the River Nile will never go bad. It will never go rotten. It will never rot. The Persians believed that. The Greeks were very interested in studying the sources of the river. Who else was very interested in studying the source of the River Nile was Alexander III, the Macedonian, well known in the world as Alexander the Great. But how the ancient Egyptian peasant farmer, thousands of years ago, if he was living on the banks of the river, which was the majority of the society at that time, just like today, how would he deal with the challenges? Okay, what type of challenges? One, we have the flooding. The flooding was a major event in ancient Egypt by the River Nile. So the ancient Egyptians had to study the flooding. The flooding can be very strong. The flooding can destroy your mud brick house. The flood can take all your land and your plants and your trees and all your wheat and all your barley away. You have to study when the flooding is coming, because you don't want to sow your seeds and then the water will come with the flooding and take the seeds away. And by this, you lose your season of agriculture and plantation. So for the ancient Egyptian, he had to be clever enough, and he was, to study when is the flooding coming. So what did they do? They studied the movement of the planets, and they studied the movement of the stars, and they studied the movement of the celestial bodies, and they linked it to the events on Earth. So how did they manage this? We'll take an example very quickly, a very simple way. He studied a star. We call it nowadays the Sirius star. Okay, S-I-R-I-U-S, Sirius. He called it Spedet, S-P-D-T, Spedet star. He called it like this in hieroglyphs. And he linked it to the famous female deity Isis. We all know Isis and Osiris, the famous legend in ancient Egypt. Isis, of course, is the naming which was given to the female deity later. Her hieroglyphic name was Iset. So he noticed something very interesting in heavens, in the sky. He noticed that the star Spedet, the star Sirius, disappears, vanishes from the sky every year for 70 days, 70 days. And on the 70th day, every and each year, without failing and precisely, it will reappear before dawn. And when she reappears on the 70th day, she will bring the flooding on the river Nile. So for him, the calculation was right in front of him. I will all the time stargaze. I will all the time notice the stars and notice the movements. And once Sirius, the star, vanishes, I start counting 70 days. And by this, I know when the flooding is coming. So I'm going to, 1, organize my plantation season accordingly. 2, I will do the houses and build the houses in a way. Some of the houses were built on half-a-meter base pillar, so that when the water comes rushing into the land, it will pass under the house. Or he will build the house over a higher plateau. All of these were kind of solutions that the ancient Egyptians did and achieved to overcome the problem of the destruction caused by, or can be caused by, the flood. Number 2, he would wait, because this water will rest on his land for some months. So he started the calendar. The calendar was, as a matter of fact, done many years BC, 100 kilometers in the desert, west of Abu Simbel, the famous temple in south of Egypt, in the beautiful Egyptian Nubia. And I trust many of you learned about Abu Simbel, because we have twice a day and twice a month and twice a year. We are always talking about Abu Simbel as a genius temple, and more than twice. Lots of lectures about Abu Simbel. Why? Because twice a year, the sun will go through the main entrance and illuminate the part of the last room in the temple, which is considered to be the Holy of Holies in ancient Egypt. And this is a genius phenomenon of how the angle of the stray will come to the and go all the way inside the temple until it reaches the end of the temple and illuminate the king's face, Ramesses II, with 2 deities beside. So 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, the historians found a circle made out of number of stones, 4 meters in diameter, and inside this circle was number of blocks of stones forming two lines, one of which is north-south orientation, and the other one is an orientation of a lateral direction of 70 degrees, and it is showing us pointing at where the sun will rise in the sky the first day of the season of the summer, which was the first day of the season of the rain. So we learned from this kind of discovery that this 4 meters diameter circle, we call it Napta Playa, and I wrote a lot about it if you want to check it online. Napta Playa, put my name, put Napta Playa, you'll find lots of TV programs and lots of lectures I'm talking about it because it's an amazing discovery. And they found that that was the first invention, which goes as back as 14,000 years before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, before the kings, the famous kings of Egypt, Ramesses II and Queen Hatshepsut and Khufu, Cheops of the Great Pyramid, before all of this, before the building of the pyramid, before the erection of the obelisks, before hieroglyphs, before all of this, all right? 14,000 years. The Egyptians invented a type of a stone invention that will orient them to when and where the sun will rise to start the rainy season. At that time, we're talking 100 kilometers away from the river Nile, almost. So they wanted to depend upon a source of water because 100 kilometers away from the river Nile, there is no river. Okay, so they will study when the rain is coming. When they were excavating beside the circle, they found a dry lake. So we learned that the Egyptians would live there for the time of the rain, and the rain will fill the lake. Animals will come to drink from the lake. They will hunt them and they will feed on them. And we found the remains of 15 houses in Napta Playa. And by this, Napta Playa became the first study of how the ancient Egyptians, 14,000 years ago, would study the source of rain, where it's going to fill a lake, and this lake will be the source of life. Also, in Napta Playa, in the middle of one of the hottest places in Africa, this I'm talking about, Napta Playa, the historians and the Egyptologists discovered number of ancient wells, also going as back as 14,000 years, which made us believe that the ancient Egyptians also knew about digging wells as source of water. But of course, digging wells became less and less because you will become more dependent on the river Nile. Challenge number 2 is what happens if the drought took place for the ancient Egyptians and the river Nile, as well as the modern Egyptians before the dams, before the old dam of Aswan and before the high dam, which was constructed around the 1960s, last century. Before those dams, how did the ancient Egyptians manage if the river Nile didn't come? If this is the expression, that the river Nile didn't come, the water did not come to Egypt. So the drought, it's dryness, it's very fatal, that is, for the ancient Egyptians. So how are they going to manage? Number 1, they built dams. Yes, 4,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians built dams, dug canals. As a matter of fact, you will be amazed to know that the first thing the king will do when he mounts the throne of Egypt, let us say the Ramesses II, let us say the famous Scorpion King. We'll take the Scorpion King as an example, okay? And by the way, when I talk the Scorpion King, I'm talking about the real Scorpion King, the real Egyptian Scorpion King, not the movie of Hollywood. The movie of Hollywood is totally wrong, of course, as usual in history. Yes, we do have a king, proven, carved, and the shape of the body, wearing the crown, and doing the festivities, doing the religious festivals, all of this. Yes, we have a king in ancient Egypt, one of the first kings, by the way, called the Scorpion King, We found a piece of a very important piece of antiquities, which shows the Scorpion King with the scorpion carved in front of his crown, hence the name, the Scorpion King. And what is he doing as the religious festival? Almost 33 or 3,400 years BC. He's holding in his hand an axe, okay, which looks like an axe made out of wood, later on could be made out of metal. In front of him is a scene, and under his feet is a scene carved of water, all right? That was explained as the king digging a canal to introduce water to a place in Egypt. So Egyptologists were highly interested in this business of why the king is holding an axe and why is he digging a canal? Why is the water running right beside the king? What is this festival? What is this religion? Is it religious? Is it a religious festival? Is it something to do with the temple? And so on. At that time, on that scene, on that depicted scene, and that carved scene out, there was no hieroglyphs enough to tell us what's going on. Normally, the ancient Egyptians would explain to you in texts all the way with fine details. But here, remember, ladies and gentlemen, my honorable guests from all over the world and from the beautiful Nepal, remember that I'm talking to you, the Scorpion King. This is one of the most pioneering humans, man, who helped a great deal in the foundation of what we call the ancient Egyptian royal families period. They called it the dynastic era or the dynastic era, the era of the royal families. So at that time, there was no enough hieroglyphs in this scene to tell us what is this water doing? What is this canal doing beside the king and vice versa? What is this king doing? So more studies were made about this important scene dealing with the history of rivers in ancient Egypt and sources of water, and they figured out the following. You will be amazed. The first thing, the first act, the first, if you like, official act that you do and you achieve as a king of ancient Egypt is the day you take the throne of Egypt, digging a canal. You have to be responsible as the ruler of the country, and at that time as the son of the solar disk, from the point of view of the ancient Egyptian temple. The king is the son of Ra, the son of Eman, the son of Jehut of wisdom, and so on and so forth. So you will have to dig a canal. Why? Because it's your responsibility as the ruler of Egypt in ancient times to flourish the country. You have to achieve a great deal of economy to the country. For drinking, irrigation, for the animals, for the pet animals, for every part of the country. So symbolically and practically and religiously, the canal of water, which is the canal of life in a desert country or a desert dominant country like ancient Egypt, is the responsibility of the king. And what happens if the drought takes place? Then the king, in some cases, would go to the temple and will give more offerings to the deity of the river Nile. There was a deity for the dynamic movements of the water of the river Nile called Hapi. Hapi. You're going to read it in books and in articles, Hapi, because there is no in the letter like this in English. So the English talking people would write it Hapi or Hapi, Hapi, H-A-P-I. But in hieroglyphs, it's Hapi. Anyway, so Hapi is the deity of the movement and the dynamic movement of the waters in the river in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. And you will see him a lot depicted on the walls of the temples. If you go to the temples of ancient Egypt, you will find Hapi as a man with a big belly and with a heavy female breast. And that was the sign and the symbol of fertility for the ancient Egyptians, because the river Nile will bring fertility, will bring mud, will bring silt. And that is the secret of success of the river Nile in ancient Egypt, that when it will flood, it will bring with it the silt. It will bring with it the mud. Now, the flooding season will stay for 4 months in ancient Egypt. So the ancient Egyptians, remember I told you about the star that they studied? And they knew that when the star will reappear on the 70th day before dawn, this star will bring the flooding with it. All right? So they will start counting 4 months as the month of inundation, as the months of flooding, as the months of inundation, as the season of inundation. Ancient Egyptians invented the calendar from there. So 360 days, it didn't work. So they added 5 more days to the year to become 365. Then later on, it became 365 and quota in the Bahira governorate in northern Egypt. And by this, Egypt would be the country and the nation that exported the 365 days and quota of the year. So they divided the year into 3 seasons, not 4, into 3 seasons. The inundation, and then the season of the sowing of the seeds, because after the inundation is over, the water will reside back to the river Nile, but it will leave what on your land as a farmer on the banks of the river? It will leave the mud, it will leave the silt. So you will sow, you will throw the seeds, and you will wait right beside the seeds and protect it from animals and birds and so on, so that you can find it coming out into a form of beautiful plants and beautiful wheat and beautiful barley. You can make bread. You can actually plant. They love planting spring onions. They planted lotus flowers, as you know. There will be the papyrus up in the big rushes in the delta, and so on and so forth. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a civilization that invented calendar. It invented directions. It invented in Nabta Playa what you would like to call nowadays the GPS, which is showing you Google Earth, actually. Google Earth. 14,000 years ago, there was Google Earth in south of Egypt. By the way, to those who would like to see that 4 meters diameter invention, which I believe it's an invention that changed the world, you can see it in the garden of the Nubian Museum in Aswan, in the beautiful Aswan. You have to visit beautiful Aswan. Oh, what a beautiful city. Finally, as we are getting closer to my time, we got 5 minutes to go. Interestingly enough, we are talking about, I'm sorry about that noise. We're talking here about a nation that depended upon how they would face the challenges. The last challenge I will mention here is the drought. We said that they built dams. We said that they dug canals. But they also invented an amazing invention called the nilometer. The nilometer is a well, sometimes form of steps, and the well will have marks on both sides, and the marks on both sides are actually going to calculate the level of the water of the River Nile in this well. All right. So, interestingly enough, they will calculate the level. Give me, please, 30 seconds. I will tell the people to stop the noise above. Give me 30 seconds, please.
Sure.
محاضرة عالمية يا جماعة شغالة دلوقتي ولا تسمعوا محاضرة عالمية في العالم بعد إذنك. في نص ساعة عندي محاضرة عالمية بعد إذنك أنا آسف. Okay, sorry for that. Sorry for that, for their apologies. And so, how are they going to deal with the drought? We said, and they invented the nilometer to calculate the movement of the water up or down. Now, according to the nilometer, which you can go and see it till today in the Elephantine Island in Aswan and in the south of Egypt, and you will notice it in the temples, like in the temple of Edfu, but also in the south. Now, here is an interesting thing. If the water is high, and the calculation by the priests of the temples that the water of the River Nile with the flooding is high, and it's very easy for the peasant farmers to irrigate the land, they will start imposing the taxes. Yes, there was a very accurate taxation system in ancient Egypt. Now, if the water is low, and it is very hard and very difficult and pretty impossible for the peasant farmer in ancient Egypt to bring water, then the governor of the city will decide no taxation this year. So he will cancel taxation totally. Why? Because the farmers couldn't get the water because the water is low and the level of the water is not convenient for the farmers. So this is how the River Nile controlled life and daily life in ancient Egypt. How interesting. And finally, the ancient Egyptians invented on the banks of the River Nile a device which is considered to be today the most ancient irrigation device in the history. And that's a device we call in Arabic shadoof. And I will show you how the shadoof works. He will bring a beautiful piece of a tree or a beautiful piece of wood. And he will bring another piece, put it right there. Here there will be a weight. There will be a big weight here, made out of mud, made out of stone. And here we are having a rope coming down with a bucket. Here comes the farmer, and he will use the weight, which is right here, to drop the bucket, which is right there, into the water to bring the water from a lower level. Fill the bucket and use the weight to bring the bucket up easily, like a lever. And the water bucket will be in your hand, and you will throw the bucket into a small canal, which will go towards your land. Finally, the ancient Egyptians believed in the field of heavens. They called it Iaro. Iaro in hieroglyphs, Iaro. Iaro in hieroglyphs is heavens. And the ancient Egyptians believed that they all wanted to go to Iaro. They all wanted to go to heaven. Don't we all? So, in order for you to go to the Iaro, in order for you as a person in ancient Egypt to go to heaven, to live beautiful, happy life in heaven forever and ever, you have to not do 42 sins according to their religion. 42 knows. The negative confession, the confession of no, you have to say no. And for the 42 no's, one of them is no, I did not. No, I did not. No, I did not pollute the river Nile. No, I did not pollute the river Nile. That is what, as an Egyptian, you would say in front of the gods, of the deities, when you are in your day of judgment, and you say, I did not kill, no, I did not lie, no, I did not look at my neighbor's wife, no, I did not steal, no, I did not get drunk, no, I did not take milk from the mouth of a child, no, I did not lie about the weight in commerce. Lots of no's, lots of negative confessions you have to do in order for you to go to the Iaro, to go to the field of reeds, field of green, field of canals. And finally, we have a gentleman who on the walls of his tomb drew in color over 3,000 years ago what he believed Iaro will be. And he drew himself and his wife and his pet cow and bulls while he was plowing the land. And he surrounded the field of reeds inside and surrounded it from outside by canals of water. Water in ancient Egypt hieroglyphs was called Mu, MW. MW is water, Mu. A true the big river, the great river, a true that is one of the namings of the river Nile. And here I conclude my talk, and back to you, Anjali, and to my beautiful attendants. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a great knowledge and information for us from how the weather pattern of Egypt has changed from rainy to now a deserted nation, and how we can see snow in places like Catherine, about how you explained to us about Blue Nile and White Nile, and about how the Egyptian and Sudanese civilizations were a part of Nile since antiquity. You also have told us very detailed about how flooding had occurred and how the ancient Egyptian civilization had studied the movement of celestial bodies and tracked the floods, and about the great scorpion kings and how he had played a great role of his dynastic eras of royal families, and also how the 365 days of year came from the history of Egypt, calendars, directions, and GPS that we are using as a modern tool right now. I'm sure our participants here have a lot of questions to ask you. So if any one of you have questions, you can leave the question on the chat box below, or can unmute yourself and can ask the question to the sir. If you have trouble unmuting the mic, you can just ask the question in the chat, and I will deliver it to the sir.
If anybody would have any inquiry about the sources of water in Egypt, I'll be more than happy to answer them. And if there is any other questions about ancient Egypt itself, if you like, I'll be more than happy. It doesn't have to be on the River Nile if you like. It can be any question about anything in ancient Egypt.
So we have a question here from Naminda Dahal, sir. What is the impact of climate change in Nile River and economy of Egypt?
Good question. Thank you very much, sir. The climate change. We all know that COP27 was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the beautiful city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt some few months ago. And I had the pleasure to present Egypt as a lecturer about the climate change in ancient Egypt. Believe it or not, they studied the climate change in ancient Egypt as well. With a lecture with the UNESCO, and I was very happy to do that. Now, The ancient Egyptians, as well as the modern Egyptians, actually studied the climate change, and they actually recorded the climate change events on writing. And we have, for example, a scene of a half lighted moon and a half darkened moon, for example. We are having mentioning about the eclipse. We are having mentioning in ancient Egypt about how the river Nile is not bringing water. We have detailed scenery of famine, which struck ancient Egypt with people with bony kind of bodies due to lack of wheat and barley and food, due to the drought and the lack of water. So yes, the ancient Egyptians actually recorded that. Now, modern Egyptians and the river Nile, there is a great concern, let us say in the last 40 to 50 years, on the cleanliness of the river Nile. We are having, for example, a great deal of movement. First of all, we have made a new minister, the Ministry of Environment in the Egyptian government. And they were responsible on stopping number of factories which were built not far away from the River Nile. So in order to keep the River Nile clean, there is a great deal of movement in the media and in the schools and universities to teach the people about how important the drop of water is today. And myself, I'm get contacted by many organizations in this country, education, the universities, schools, TV, radio, books, to talk about I was encouraged to write a book about the River Nile called The Vein. I addressed it as, I titled it as The Vein of Life. The River Nile, the Vein of Life. And I was actually encouraged by the government to write a book like this, which I'm very proud of. So this business of how the High Dam, when it was built, and the Nasser Lake was built, right, and formed right behind it, and the challenges, because to have in a few years to have an artificial lake of over 500 long kilometers lake, this is quite a challenge, including this is a country which is packed with temples and packed with villages and packed with beautiful societies in the south. Many villages had to move, many temples had to be cut and raised, and that was a great help also from the world and the UNESCO, who helped us in the moving of the temples to save it from the water. We have a great number of crocodiles in the Nasser Lake with Nile perch and fish. And now there is a great deal of discussion in Egypt about how we can manage to use this business as maybe perhaps crocodile farms will be a great deal of what's happening in the Nasser Lake or the Nubian Sea behind the High Dam in the south. Are we suffering from lack of water? So far, no. So far, because I know there are some people who are kind of interested to know if the dam kind of decisions made by Ethiopia on closing and the lakes and so on. But I guess now politics came in, and the talks are happening for the last few years, so that Ethiopia will have its water and Egypt will have its water, and nobody gets any negative influence. So are we aware of the importance of water? Yes, and we became more aware of the importance of water when the dam of Ethiopia started, as news started to appear on the land, and with many kind of meetings made, diplomatic meetings made between Egypt and Ethiopia, so that everybody will have his share of water without being influenced, especially countries in Africa, as you well know, will depend upon water not only as sources of water, but also sources of electricity, because the high dam gives and generates a great deal of electricity to the country, as well as the dam which are built in other countries like beautiful Sudan and beautiful Ethiopia. Got a second question, please?
For the second, we have a comment from Mr. Deepak Givali, sir, who will be later giving his reflective remarks as well. He has said that excellent presentation, Dr. Bessam. I will be making similar comments with what you said with cultural practices in Himalaya Ganga that we will be doing after the question and answer discussion. We have another question from Sushant Dahal. He says that Nile flows through a lot of countries. How is water managed internationally between the countries? Water sharing among countries?
Yes. We were just talking about how the politics came in to solve a very, very sensitive issue, actually. I have to say, it's a very sensitive issue because we're talking about over 9-10 countries, right? And we are talking about basically most of the countries that the River Nile goes through depends upon the River Nile, all right? So in Egypt, we have lakes, we have wells, as we said. We have great projects which took place in the last, I would say, 10-15 years in making the salty water into kind of drinkable water used for irrigation, trying to deal chemically with all sorts of water so that it can be correctly used for irrigation for the land. For example, that is happening a lot today in Egypt. That is, you deal with the water chemically and you try to fix it chemically so that you can use it. Kind of turning the salty water into the sweet water. So yeah, there is a great deal. Now, for the question is, how do we deal with it? How those countries? Actually, those countries, when they meet the representatives, everyone will be introducing the needs. And as you all well know, the needs changes according to the number of people. So if the number of people in a country is increasing, so the usage of water and the need for water will increase. So they would meet and they would discuss. For the Egyptians, for example, it is enough 55 billion cubic meter water, or do we need more because we became more? Now we are almost 110 million Egyptians, more or less. So yes, we are increasing in a very high rate in Egypt. That would need more water for the usage, for the daily usage, for irrigation, for drinking, for cleaning, and for many other things, for generating electricity and so on. So yes, it's quite a sensitive issue, and I would, as a non-governmental person, I would participate with my own proposals of that all of Africa should actually unite so that we don't go through what we went through. If you remember, a few years ago, when Africa was suffering from the droughts and many countries suffering from the droughts. Egypt did not suffer from the drought, as we saw in other beautiful nations in Africa. So bless them, they went through very, very hard times, and we also the pictures and the videos, and we also how those nations suffered. So finally, in answering this question, my proposal also is when 10 people representing 10 countries, for example, or 11 countries, sit together to divide the water among them, right, coming from the Blue River and the White River Nile, starting from the main sources in Africa, in the hearts of beautiful Africa, we all should be looking at the other as well. So if I am, as an Egyptian, interested in fitting the number of billions of cubic meter water, then I'll have to be looking also at what Sudan will be doing and how Ethiopia will be doing, and how other beautiful countries that the River Nile is dealing with will be doing. As a thought, every country should be listening to the other so that we all can combine forces, and not one place would take more than the other, or one will take more quantity than the other. And by this, of course, it will cause problems to the other. No, the other is as important as you. You think about yourself and about your nation, about your people, but you also think about the other equally in the same importance and the same interest, because we are not living alone in this world. We are all together. Like, look what's happening now. Now, through a small mobile, I'm contacting the world, and you are contacting the world. Nepal, Egypt, two civilized nations are telling the world about sources of water in history and in modern times, right? So this is an effort made by you guys in Nepal and us here in Egypt. And by this, we are telling the world through this lecture or this session about how we all should, if you are living in the beautiful Himalaya or living on the beautiful city of Aswan, or the gorgeous city of Alexandria, or living on the Egyptian Sinai, or in the oasis, or a tribe living in the western desert of Egypt, we should all be together having a fair share of water for life. Water is life, and we believe this in Egypt, and I think the whole world believes in this. Even the majority of the people in Egypt here believe in that the water is the secret of life. And we in Quran, the Muslims all over the world, 2 billion people, almost 2 billion people in the world believe in Quran. And in the Holy Quran of the Muslims, the Holy Book of Muslims, God, Allah is saying, and we created all alive things from water. That is a famous sentence in the Holy Quran. So we are raised since we are very young about the concerning the importance of the water and how the water is literally and practically life.
Thank you so much, sir, for your thoughtful response. The answer addressed almost all the questions that was at the chat box here. We had similar kind of questions, so I think all the questions has been addressed from here. If anyone has any other further question, you can also send us here in the chat box. And as we have a very limited time, we will be now going to the second part of our discussion here. So I would like to now request our former Minister and Pragya, Mr. Deepak Gewali, sir, Distinguished Fellow, Culture Theory and Politician Economy, NWCF, for his reflective remarks, where he will be making comments on the cultural practices in the Himalaya Ganga. Sir.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Dr. Bessam. This was a wonderful presentation. And also, I'd like to thank the younger leadership of Nepal Water Conservation Foundation for taking this very important initiative for international water understanding and collaboration. Nepal Water Conservation Foundation, pre-COVID, there's always life before COVID and after COVID. I think, as we all know, it was a break with this COVID thing. We had initiated something called the Mekong-Ganga Cooperation, the cooperation between the Gangetic Basin, which we call Ganga, and the Mekong. The reason we did that was because we began to understand that both the Ganga and the Mekong were civilizational rivers. Now, what do we mean by civilizational rivers? It's a river that carries the ethos of an entire civilization. It carries the history. It carries the value systems. It carries a lot of things. If you go to the Mekong, whether it is in Laos or Cambodia or Thailand and anywhere, you notice very similar practices that are done in Nepal or India, all the way down to South India, and also in the Mekong. Okay, so this is what we had initiated. After Dr. Bessam's talk, I believe we should now also have this Ganga-Nile, cooperation, because it's obvious Nile is also an extremely old civilizational river. Okay. Now we have other civilizational rivers, Tigris, Euphrates in Iraq. You have the Brahmaputra coming out of Mansarovar, a lake in the Himalaya. And what is interesting is the Sindhu River, what is now called the Indus in Pakistan. Indus, Brahmaputra, and Ganga, they all originate from this one place, the Mansarovar Lake, around which is now in Tibet. Okay, and it has tremendous religious significance for billions of people. Okay, similarly, the Yangtze also has, as I have noticed, many civilizational aspects of the Chinese civilization there. Now, why is this extremely important? And for this, I come back to Dr. Basam's points. I'm struck by about 5 different things he has said, which can be explored further, much further, to understand where we have some extreme, commonalities. Dr. Basam, you mentioned this, about the Persians taking Nile water, all the way to Persia. Well, if you come to Nepal, in West Nepal, during the pilgrimage season, when Indian pilgrims all the way from Madras in South India come to Nepal to go to Lake Mansarovar in Tibet. And when they come back, the airline is, the small airline, the Dornier or whatever is transporting them back to Kathmandu, is filled with jerry cans from Mansarovar Lake as the holy water. It's aircrafts don't allow any liquid to be carried because of all the, the security there. But here you have jerry cans of water from Mansarovar. It's the same, the sacredness of water from certain spaces. And there's also this belief that Ganga water is never polluted, although Ganga is heavily polluted. But this basic belief that it cannot be polluted. It carries, it's not just the microbes it carries. It carries something else which is eternal and does not get polluted, okay? Eternal in our human value system. The other issue you mentioned was, you talked about the catfish elephant, element. Well, most in Hindu Buddhist practices, you have this mythical element called the makar. And most of our stone water spouts, where water comes out from the springs and all, have this makar element, which is half elephant trunk and half crocodile, and there's lots of myths associated with that. And that is the symbolism of water, the crocodile and the elephant, okay? And also very interesting, you mentioned the rituals associated with rivers. Well, we have rituals associated very much with waters and rivers. Most of you all, the Kumbh Mela at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna. But there are Kumbh Melas in other rivers also. Wherever 2 rivers meet, it's regarded as sacred. Okay, and in the Kumbh Mela, the last one, which happens on the zodiac cycles of 12 years with Saturn and Jupiter in certain conjunction, the last 100 million people visited Allahabad Sangam in India. Okay, all my relatives, we ask, where are they? Oh, they've gone to Allahabad. So that is how it was. It's also there in Nepal in all the smaller sangams. But the interesting point is the river Sangam, where 2 rivers meet, and there is a belief that there's a 3rd river underground, which is groundwater backflow, actually. It's called Saraswati, the 3rd river. These 3 rivers in Hindu yoga practices of Raj Yoga are equated to the variety of vitality human channels. All the way from the spine up to the crown of the head, is compared with the confluence of 3 rivers. That we have in our own human body also. So it's a matching confluence, okay? And finally, what I was really struck by is when you mentioned the crowning of, and I'm using an Anglo-Saxon word, okay, crowning, which does not match our civilizational word, and I'll explain in a second, the Egyptian ancient kings, okay? Now, in Hinduism also, a crown has really no significance. It's just an ornament like a earring or a ring you wear on a finger. It's important, but not that important. The word for coronation, coronation is a Northern European word of Viking kings putting crowns on their head and having the authority. In Hinduism, the word is Rajyabhishek. and is translated wrongly as coronation. A colleague of ours in NWCF, who's done his PhD on water, Dr. Sudhindra Sharma, first mentioned this to me when he studied both India and Bangkok on the rivers and the water, and Nepal, where the word Rajya Vishek comes from two words. Rajya means state. Okay, Avishek means you are bathing in the holy waters. The process of bathing or sprinkling holy water on by a priest during religious ceremony is called Avishek. Okay, now what is Rajya Vishek? A king, a prince is born, a king is made. A prince is made into a king when his father dies, and that happens in the Hindu Buddhist, and the same with the king in Thailand, by the way. The Hindu Buddhist practice, waters from all the rivers, the sacred spots of all the rivers in the kingdom are collected. In Nepal's case, it's 108 pots of water, 108 being a holy number. And especially from rivers that are, when they bend around, the northern flowing rivers for some reason are regarded as very sacred. Nile is very northern flowing, so the whole of the Nile is sacred, I guess, in Hindu terms. But the waters in 108 pots are collected and by priests and brought to the palace, where the king is then bathed in those 108 pots of water. The waters of those rivers wash the king, and he then becomes king over all the land that the rivers have washed. Now, this is an extremely important symbolism, that one has to do. So what I would close by basically saying that I think we should begin this process of Nile-Ganga collaboration to understand these deeper ethos. I would also like to add that, given that our birth to death rituals are associated with rivers, when I die, I'll be cremated and my ashes will be, consigned to the river, to be flown away, taken away by the rivers. It happens, all our birth and death rituals. Like Kumbh Mela in Nepal, we've just concluded this Sali Nadi festival, in a 1-month festival in Kathmandu, in one of the small holy tributaries of the Bagmati River. Okay, so what is important, it is in modernization process that we do studies of geological, hydrological events, and all these are extremely valuable. Okay. The problem came when, with modernization, came this economic reductionism. We began to reduce the value of everything to its immediate economic value, forgetting the other non-economic values that are even more important for life, for collective life of not just communities, but entire nations, entire collection of nations along a river. So this is where I think, we need to, in addition to the Mekong-Ganga collaboration that we had initiated past, there's a need to, again, revitalize that. There's also a need to begin this Nile-Ganga collaboration. I end with that, with again thanking Dr. Bessam for an excellent talk that has provoked our thinking into moving into this new direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your reflective remarks and your insightful contributions. We have got the opportunity to learn from and understand from both the perspective of Egypt and Nepal. Now, if our resource person for the day, Honorable Dr. Bessam Al-Sama, have anything to say addition to it?
Thank you very much, Anjali, and thank you very much, Doctor. I can, while I'm listening to you, Doctor, I can picture you on the banks of the river giving that talk. That would be amazing. Wow. The proposal is beautiful on having a unity between Ganga, Nepal, Himalaya, River Nile, Egypt, ancient, modern civilizations, as I mentioned before. So yes, of course, I'll be more than happy. And I can also picture something while our Honorable Doctor was giving his beautiful and very interesting lecture, very informative lecture. Thank you very much, Doctor. I can imagine a river Nile built in Upper Egypt with the temples on the river, and a convention made, and we introduce 50, 60 authorities from the world, and we come out of this Nile cruise all as one in free water, an important drop of water to each and every of the 8 billion humans living on Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We really hope to continue this dialogue and collaboration between Nepal and Egypt in future. It was really grateful for having you and giving your valuable time to us. Now, without further ado, I would like to request Dr. Nagminda Dahal, sir, Chairperson Climate Change Adaptation and Management, NWCF, for summarizing today's event and formally ending the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's my great privilege to have with you all together. This is a very great moment for NWCF because Dr. Basam Sama, you have come all the way from Egypt to connect with us in the Himalaya region, and the Nile story. The story from the Nile and to the audience of the Himalaya is really inspiring to all of us. And yeah, thank you so much. And this has been possible because of our young and energetic youth initiative who have been to the last climate conference in Egypt. Then somehow they got inspired to connect, to bring this kind of issue in our lecture series. So that is the new initiative for all of us here. And as you are the renowned historian and author and lecturer and winner of the big prizes of UNESCO and other agencies, it gives us a great privilege to host you at Nepal Water Conservation Foundation platform with the 73rd Pani session. This is the it started back in 1997, as I already mentioned, and now it happened to continue by the youth-led initiative. And you have with your story, we see that the Himalaya issue in the Himalaya region, the issue of water resource is really challenging, and our youth are really worried about that. But your knowledge, your inspiring story have added, complemented their understanding to manage water from the history to the current and the present generation. And our Pragya Deepak Gyawali, who is the founder of the Nepal Water Conservation Foundation as well, and is our guru. And he has complemented with his own knowledge from on the Himalaya Ganga theme. He's a renowned author, and he's a well-inspiring person all over the world to talk on the water issues, particularly with the cases of the Himalaya. So these two lecture back to back has complemented, make this lecture series a very inspiring and great one. And I would like to thank you both of you for this illuminating knowledge, insightful details. And going by, I would like to thank our participants. I saw there were 45 participants in the direct in the Zoom, but many more others in the Facebook Live. Majority of them were there 20s and 30s, so they're young and graduates and inspiring youth leaders. And one more thing is important is that majority of the participants are female. So this is also very encouraging to all of us. So this is all possible because our youth team has worked very hard, particularly our NWCF Youth Focal Point, Anjali Chalise, who have worked very hard to manage all those details in the background. And under the leadership of Lalmadi Wagle, Executive coordinator of Nepal Water Conservation Foundation. I would like to thank both of them. And finally, the team of youth-driven network called Unify. This is the this one WMO supported youth initiative. Nepal chapter Unify has done a lot of work to contribute to drive this lecture series toward the more youth audiences. So for this purpose, I would like to thank Unify team, and finally, I would like to all those, the rest of the participants and everyone for joining this virtual lecture series. Thank you so much. And here is, thank you so much for the generating this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Basham from Nepal Water Conservation Foundation. I would like to hand over this to our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Basham, as a letter of appreciation. Thank you. Thank you all. With this, I would like to close this session.
Thank you very, very much. What a beautiful certificate of appreciation. Thank you, sir. Thank you to all the Nepal nation. Thank you for your great generosity, and wish to see you one day on the River Nile. And I would love to come to Ganga and Himalaya and Nepal to visit it as a beautiful country with beautiful people with kind hearts. I will treasure this certificate and I will convey it to the Egyptian people and the Egyptian media. And I would like to say that hopefully we will have more sessions and more beautiful discussions and informations about water for the coming future, God willing. All my love and all my heart goes to you in Nepal and to the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you. Our big hands to Dr. Basham. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.